Hey guys, my name is Dice Rollin'. Today we're going to be taking a look at some facts you didn't know about everyone's favorite 90s slasher flick. Scream was directed by Wes Craven. It tells the story of Sidney Prescott, who is now under attack from a masked killer near the anniversary of her mother's murder. So without further ado, these are some things you didn't know about Scream.
Movies don't create psychos! Movies make psychos more creative!
For anyone who may be wondering, that is a wig that Drew Barrymore is wearing. None of the actors ever met the voice of Ghostface, Roger Jackson. When Casey and Sidney are talking to Ghostface over the phone, Campbell and Barrymore are actually talking to him. This was all Craven's idea, as he thought that this would help bring real shock to the actors hearing his voice. It's also interesting that Jackson's voice work was only meant to be a sort of placeholder that would be dubbed over later. But the producers decided that his voice would remain, with Craven saying that it was an intelligent and evil voice that would become irreplaceable to the franchise. The design for the Ghostface mask is based off of a few different things. The ghost characters from the Betty Boop cartoons, Scream by Edvard Munch, and the cover of The Wall by Pink Floyd. Its look is supposed to show a caricature of screaming and crying. According to the designer Slyerton, it's a horrible look, it's a sorry look, it's a frantic look. During a portion of the scene where Casey is using the phone, the crew forgot to disconnect the phone. This resulted in a very confused 911 operator hearing Drew Barrymore screaming and crying. During the scene where Ghostface smashes the window with his head, and Casey hits him with the phone, Wes Craven is the one in the costume. And yes, he really was hit in the face. During the scene where Casey's parents return home to find signs of a disturbance, Casey's father tells his wife to go to the Mackenzies. This is the same thing that Tommy and Lindsay were told by Laurie in Halloween 1978. During the scenes with phone calls, Roger Jackson actually made the calls on set with a cell phone. Because of this, there was a point where police contacted the crew, believing that there was a real serial killer making these phone calls. When Billy appears at Sidney's bedroom window and scares her, it mimics Glenn doing the same to Nancy in A Nightmare on Elm Street. Rose McGowan bleached her hair blonde so that she would look more contrasting to Neve Campbell. If you'll notice, during the scene where Dewey speaks with the sheriff about the costume worn by the killer, the name of it is Father Death, despite it having been labeled by fans as Ghostface. A couple of cameos you may have noticed came from Linda Blair as one of the reporters hounding Sidney, and Wes Craven himself as the Freddy Krueger-esque janitor. That is the actual costume from A Nightmare on Elm Street, by the way. A number of people will have instantly recognized the principal from his Happy Days character. As a special nod to Fonzie, you can actually see the very same black leather jacket he used to wear in the series among the things in the principal's closet. There are a number of different misdirections throughout the movie. One that isn't caught as often is the fact that Sheriff Burke wears the same boots as Ghostface. For the scene in which Ghostface is approaching Randy and preparing to kill him, Skeet Ulrich is wearing the costume. This is because he requested to wear it for one scene. Also during this scene, we hear Randy repeatedly telling Jamie Lee Curtis to look behind her and warn her of Michael Myers. This is quite meta because of the actor's real name and the very same situation happening. Billy mentions how the fake blood he's covered in is made of corn syrup. Ironically, this is exactly what the crew used for all the blood throughout the movie. There were quite a few moments and lines that were off the cuff. During the scene where Billy tells Stu to get the gun and Stu can't find it, his line of "Houston, we have a problem" was improvised. The scene where Billy hits Stu with the phone was an accident. Because of all of the fake blood that the two actors were covered in, the phone legitimately slipped out of Ulrich's hand. Lillard's reaction and response were genuine and ad-libbed. The following line of "My mom and dad are going to be so mad at me" was also ad-libbed. During the scene where Stu and Sidney are struggling, both Stu's line of "I always had a thing for you, Sid," and Sid's response "In your dreams" were improvised by Campbell and Lillard. The stuntman in the Ghostface costume during the scene in which Sidney stabs Billy with an umbrella was supposed to hit a pad under Ulrich's shirt. The first stab did hit the pad, but the second did not and instead hit him in the chest. Ulrich had open heart surgery as a child and has metal wiring beneath his skin from it. The umbrella hit this area, so his reaction and scream are real. Dewey was originally supposed to die from the stab to the back. If you look closely, whenever Dewey is in frame, he isn't breathing. Wes Craven decided to film the scene of Dewey being loaded into the ambulance just in case. It turned out to be a very wise decision, as test audiences ended up loving the character. So Craven added the scene letting viewers know Dewey was alive. Approximately 50 gallons of fake blood was used during production. In a rather interesting approach, Marco Beltrami made the decision to ignore conventional approaches to horror scores. Instead, he went with a Western style, taking inspiration from Ennio Morricone. Kevin Williamson took inspiration from a real-life event for the plot of Scream. In 1990, in Gainesville, Florida, there were a series of student murders. The killer was Danny Harold Rowling, otherwise known as the Gainesville Ripper. From this, Williamson wrote an 18-page treatment. The original title for the movie was Scary Movie, which ironically went on to become its own franchise parodying the horror genre. The directors who were initially approached for Scream were Danny Boyle, Sam Raimi, Robert Rodriguez, and George A. Romero. However, Kevin Williamson was concerned that none of them got the tone of the script, as they each seemed to perceive it as pure comedy. But Robert Rodriguez did end up filming the footage for Stab within the universe of the Scream franchise. Wes Craven initially turned down making Scream. At the time, he was busy with The Haunt remake, and didn't want to make another horror film after that. There were a few reasons why he changed his mind. One was Drew Barrymore agreeing to appear in the movie. Another was a 10-year-old fan confronting Craven with the accusation that he had gone soft since his earlier works, like Last House on the Left. Apparently, this was the last straw, as he signed on for Scream shortly after. The Ghostface mask was created by Funworld, specifically Bridget Slyerton, during the Halloween season of 1991 and 1992. It was part of a series she called Fantastic Faces, with this mask being called the Peanut-Eyed Ghost. It was found later by Marion Madalena while she was location scouting, who pointed it out to Wes Craven. The rights to the design and title of Ghostface still belong to Funworld. Ghostface was originally supposed to wear a white robe instead of black. However, this was changed because people were afraid of comparisons to the Ku Klux Klan. Drew Barrymore was originally set to play Sydney. However, Barrymore decided that she wanted to take the role of Casey instead, as this would tell the audience that anything could happen. Ghostface may not have ended up wearing the mask that has become iconic if Bob Weinstein had had his way. Apparently, after seeing portions of rough cuts from the first scene, he called the mask idiotic. He wanted the producers to pick 7 different masks and film one scene with each one, so he could choose one he liked. The producers refused and threatened to shut down the production. They told Weinstein to let them finish the sequence with Drew Barrymore before he decided on anything. After he watched the completed scene, he was happy to let the Ghostface mask be used without another complaint. A method that Wes Craven used to scare Barrymore and make her cry was telling her true stories of animal cruelty. Given that Barrymore is an avid animal lover, this was apparently a trustworthy technique. Craven had said that the night before they started shooting, she told him a story about a dog having been burned by its owner. It petrified her, and she started crying as she was telling it. Thus, whenever he needed her to be near hysterics, Craven would say, "Drew, lighting the lighter," and she would burst into tears. All of the scenes involving Drew Barrymore were filmed in the first 5 days of production. Some of the actresses who auditioned for the role of Sydney were A.J. Langer, Brittany Murphy, Melinda Clark, Melissa Joan Hart, and Alicia Witt. Tori Spelling was also considered for the part of Sydney, and during the scene when discussing who would play Sid, Dewey mentions Meg Ryan, to which Sydney replies with my luck, it would be Tori Spelling. Reese Witherspoon had also turned down the part. Molly Ringwald was approached to play the part of Sydney. However, she declined because she didn't want to play a high school student at 27. Neve Campbell did not want to sign on to Scream, but upon hearing that Ulrich was involved, she agreed. Both Janine Garofalo and Brooke Shields were considered for the part of Gail. Elizabeth Berkley also auditioned but was turned down due to Showgirls. Due to her character in Friends, Courteney Cox almost didn't get to play Gail. The producers weren't initially willing to have her play a bitchy character, because Monica was seen as nice. But this is exactly why Cox continued to pursue the role until she finally succeeded. Melinda Clarke, Rebecca Gayheart, and Charlotte Ayana were considered to play Tatum, and though Gayheart didn't get the role of Tatum due to scheduling conflicts with Somebody Is Waiting, she did get to appear in Scream 2. Seth Green, Jason Lee, Jamie Kennedy, and Breckin Meyer had all auditioned for the part of Randy. One of the reasons why Jamie Kennedy got the role was due to the fact that he often improvised his lines, making Wes Craven laugh. Joaquin Phoenix was considered for the role of Billy, but he turned it down. Michael Lanz and Jason Whalen were also considered for the part, and Whalen even did a screen test with Neve Campbell. One reason why Skeet Ulrich was cast as Billy was because he bore a resemblance to Johnny Depp in A Nightmare on Elm Street. Among the actors who auditioned to play Stu, Freddie Prinze Jr. was one. Matthew Lillard being cast as Stu was accidental. He was with his girlfriend at the time at a different audition, and Lisa Beach happened to see him in the hallway of the building. She asked him if he would audition for the role, and he got it with incredible ferocity. The school that Sydney and her friends were originally supposed to be attending was set at the Santa Rosa High School, but the school board had a look at the script and denied filming at the school shortly before filming was to begin. Their reasoning was that the movie was too violent, and they had originally thought it was a comedy. So Healdsburg became the new school location. That didn't mean that Craven was just going to let this go though. If you pay attention to the credits sequence, in the special thanks category, he included a line saying, "No thanks whatsoever to the Santa Rosa City School District Governing Board." Skeet Ulrich was convinced that he was in a serious horror movie. Because of this, he was often confused by Lillard and Kennedy's acting, until Wes Craven would remind him that the movie was meant to be satirical. Stu's party lasts about 40 minutes, and took 21 days to film. Once the scene wrapped, the crew had shirts with "I survived scene 118" on them. They jokingly referred to this as the longest night in horror history. When figuring out whether or not to give the killers a motive, Kevin Williamson couldn't decide. The opinions of the studio were split on having them have no motivation to be scarier, and giving them motivation as a resolution. So Williamson ended up using both, with Stu having no real solid motivation, and Billy having one in his mother leaving him. You can thank Scream for the surge of caller ID use, as it tripled after the movie's release. It took approximately 8 weeks to film Scream, and 2 months to edit it. Scream was initially given an NC-17 rating. The film was sent in to the MPAA over 9 times. Each time they told Craven to cut more of the gorier scenes. At some point, Bob Weinstein contacted the MPAA and had them give the movie an R rating. When asked by Wes Craven on how he got them to do this, Weinstein said that he told them to look at the film as a comedy. So those were some facts about Scream you may not have known. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a like to let me know. And don't forget to leave a comment down below telling me what other horror movies you'd like to see me dig up some facts about. Also, don't forget to share this video to help the channel grow, and subscribe for more videos like this. See you later.